It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. It's kind of a trope. Foreign comic moves to the United States, notices the stuff we take for granted, figures of speech, customs, the way cars look. Then they work it into their act. It's been going on since before Yakov Smirnoff. It will probably outlast all of us. Maeve Higgins is a comic and memoirist, very well known back home in Ireland. She moved to New York City in her early 30s, and yes, she worked her observations about America and New York into her set. But she also probed deeper. She thought about what led her to make the move, what it says about her, what it's like being in this strange, amazing city thousands of miles away from home. Then she wrote a book about it. It's called Maeve in America, Essays by a Girl from Somewhere Else. It's a collection of personal essays about what it's actually like to immigrate to the United States. It's a really compelling read. Can't recommend it highly enough. She's a funny and brilliant writer. Let's take a listen to some of her stand-up. Here she is on stage before an audience of Bullseye fans at Max FunCon.
When I am going out with someone, I don't know what to call him, usually I try and learn the name, obviously, but I don't know, I guess boyfriend's okay, with adolescent maybe, a partner is just so, it's so business-like, it's so grown-up, just like, we merged in August and now, blue sky thinking, I don't know, business. And then I feel like seeing someone has sort of like fantasy connotations, just like I'm seeing someone, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm seeing someone. Can you see him? He's just there. Just there in the rocking chair by the window.
Maeve Higgins, welcome to Bullseye. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's creepy to hear myself doing those little jokes that I've forgotten.
Maeve, you know that you're a professional performer, right?
Yeah, but I don't listen.
There's a line in your book. I want to say it was in your book. It might have been something else that I read you say recently, which was that you do like doing television because it proves that you're real when you watch it.
Very true. Yeah, very true. I mean, it's, with stand-up, it just disappears and then you're like, did that happen? Am I here in this hotel room? I'm just alone all the time. It doesn't feel like you really exist. But yeah, TV is proof of that, which is how I know America is real. It's on TV so much.
And when you came to the United States, which is maybe like 4 or 5 years ago now, something like that?
Yeah, almost 5. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How did it compare to your expectations of what it would be?
Well, I mean, I constantly get things. I always imagine things differently than they will be. But I guess visually, I expected New York to be the way it is because I'd seen it in so many films and, it's so many buildings that I had never been to, but I recognized. So there is this odd familiarity that I had with the city. But the rest of it, I feel like I imagined everybody would be in black turtlenecks. And I really thought there would be more sushi than there is. I think maybe I learned about New York when sushi was cool here and new, but now people are just yeah, we might have sushi, we might have something else, But I'm but wait, I thought we were going to be sophisticated. And so I did. I also kind of had I moved here to be a writer, and I certainly had a romantic idea of kind of having all these writer friends and getting together in salons and quipping to each other or something. Oh, watch her, she's got a sharp tongue. But then I got here and it's everyone's just oh, I only got paid $100 for 1,000 words. Do you guys know of any dog walking business? It's very different than I thought it was going to be in that way.
Americans are almost compulsively plain spoken, especially in big cities and on the coast. We'll just say something weird and intense about ourselves.
Oh, certainly. And I found that so confronting when I first got to New York, because I think in Ireland we kind of reveal a lot without saying much, but we do kind of find little connections here and there with our small talk. And then in England there was this kind of aloofness that I couldn't crack, and here I just was oh my, the level of openness with relative strangers. was at one of these parties that I'm sure you're familiar with, which is like a kids party, but all the adults go to, and it kind of like blends into the evening time and people are drinking and the kids are all playing. And I got chatting to this one guy and he said to me with the first minute of meeting him, he said, you know what people don't tell you is that you're not always going to like your kids. Sometimes you're not going to like your kids. And I was like, whoa, because I just asked, like, was he online for the bouncy castle? And then he like hit me with this, like, it was just so intense. But like at the same time, I find it kind of relieving because when you come from a place like Ireland, there's still a lot of repression there. And I wrote about this and I wrote about it in the New York Times because I was trying to explain it. And I was like, look, when I was a kid, my brother came home and he made a joke and the punchline was about rape and none of us knew what rape was. And my mom, we all started laughing because the way you like laugh at jokes when you're a child, even if you don't get them, but like,
Sure.
the rhythm of them. And my brother said the punchline and then my mother said, I don't know why you're laughing. And we kind of said, yeah, we don't know why either. Like, what's that word, rape? And she said, rape is when someone loves you, but you don't want them to love you. And we were like, oh. So it's that level of like not talking to each other about real stuff that I came from. And then to get here, I mean, specifically to New York, whatever about like the Midwest or the South, people just get straight into it with you. There's like no time for kind of, that sort of delicate slash, hidden subtext.
What's your relationship to Irish American America?
I mean, at the moment, I'm just really ashamed of a lot of the Irish Americans, particularly the ones in power. I hate to see Irishness being used against other immigrants, and I see that all the time. Mike Pence, last year, Mike Pence made, he loves to talk about his Irishness and he loves to sort of bludgeon people over the head with the fact that like his granddad came from Mayo, I think, in 1922. And, he started work as a streetcar driver in Chicago, and he like raised his family and was a great man and pulled himself up by his bootstraps. And Mike Pence like told that story to a group of Latino businessmen last year. And when I read about it, I was just like, oh man, like in 1922, basically he was fleeing a civil war that had just come after, a war of independence, which you could equate to today's Syrians, right? Like you're trying to escape this war zone. Syrians are banned from America. Mike Pence has been trying to do that for many years. And then he came to America. He was welcomed in. Had he been Chinese in 1922, he wouldn't have been allowed in because it was the Chinese Exclusion Act. So he was already lucky there that he was white. He got in, he got a job as a streetcar driver. Had he been a black person born in America, he wouldn't have been allowed to get that job because it was all unionized and blacks were not allowed to work on the streetcar for another few years. So I just see all these advantages that he had. I don't really see the story of like, oh, here's a scrappy little Irish man, with nothing to his name. He was already privileged, and Mike Pence is like privileged to the point, to the power of 1,000. So, Paul Ryan is another one, and Mick Mulvaney on St. Patrick's Day last year. Mick Mulvaney. Also, I'm sorry for like ranting about Mike Pence as if like you are Mike Pence. It's just that I know I would never like get in a room with him because his wife wouldn't let us or whatever weird rule he has.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair enough. I mean, he and I dated for 4 years. Yeah. Before he met his wife. Yeah, and if you're still in contact, would you text him and say stop using his Irishness? But yeah, it's really, it's devastating for me as an Irish person to see them in the halls of power, like having pulled up the ladder behind them and, so quickly turned on other immigrants. It's really not that long ago that like Paul Ryan's, ancestors came over to escape the famine, and Mick Mulvaney is my personal little, I saw him, he was wearing like a shamrock for St. Patrick's Day last year. And he was wearing the shamrock as he was announcing cuts to famine relief in sub-Saharan Africa.
And I was just like, what? Like literally Ireland, like in our DNA, we should remember that we had a huge famine that killed 1 million people out of 8 million. And we, we just don't seem to remember that. Something about being America and being a white immigrant here just makes us forget, I think.
I actually read the transcript of that speech, and the phrase that sticks out to me, or stuck out to me, was, "You can't have my pot of gold."
And
we should explain. He was also wearing a green top hat.
I mean, the man, it's like too easy to mock what the administration looks like at the moment. And I would say, as an Irish person, I don't want to get into it. But he does look like a leprechaun. That particular man does look like a leprechaun. And I know because I've seen leprechauns.
Maeve, lately you've been podcasting with the former president of Ireland, Mary Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
She's also the former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. She's a pretty distinguished woman. Did the two of you like meet up at a cafe? Did you like run into each other at a pug meetup?
No, my first impression of her was made when I was 8 years old. That was when she was president. And so to me, she's always just been this like powerful woman in a red blazer with like clip-on earrings who like goes around like being righteous. So I've known her since I was a child in that sense. And then I heard that like she wanted to make a podcast because she's hugely into climate justice and she's so passionate about it and really wants to spread the word. So I think initially she was like, I need to make a film about this. And then people were like, a film takes a really long time. And like, why don't you make a podcast? And she was like, what's a podcast? She didn't know what a podcast was. So then she had a chemistry test, or I had a chemistry test with her to see, if I could sort of chat with her and bring some levity and some, obviously like I'm a podcaster, so I could bring that to the table. But it was terrifying. Like they flew me to London to meet her. She's incredibly busy. Like she was coming back from Rwanda. She was like on her way to, it was her 50th anniversary graduation from Harvard. So she was like going to go there next. So I met her in London. She had one morning to spare to test out a few people. And I was first. And I got lost in London. So I was like running around, looking in all these like shuttered windows, trying to find her. And I found the building, but I couldn't find the door. So I was looking in the window and I just saw her peering out at me. She's like in her 70s. She's a stateswoman. She looks exactly the way she used to look like when I knew her as a child. It was so disconcerting. So I was just kind of like mouthing through the window like, sorry, I was late and I was lost. And it was a nightmare. But we met and she thought I was okay. And we started to make the podcast like the next week. So it was it's fascinating like to be in a room with her. Like the other person that I podcast with is Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I would sort of compare them in the way that like, when someone just knows so much more than you that you just feel like kind of like a puppy, and they're a world-renowned astrophysicist. Like
Neil deGrasse Tyson was on this show once. And he nerd bullied me so hard. I asked him like if he ever was like overwhelmed by the like almost infinite nature of space, like sort of like when you go to the beach and you look out over the horizon, then you remember that you're going to die. And he came down on me like a hammer. He just destroyed me on my own show.
I didn't hear that one. I want to hear that so bad. Did you edit it so that you sounded cooler?
I edited it so that we were both wearing a vest with stars on it.
I mean, you just have to kind of like, I don't know, you just have to like go with the ride. Like when somebody knows so much, would you say that his knowledge is as infinite as the universe? But like, it's the same with Mary Robinson. Like, I just have to bow down and be like, you are the expert. And like, my job is to just try and like help you, help get it out of you and help you put it in terms that like we can understand. And I think it's a really fun and a really easy job to do. And I feel so lucky that I get to do it, and that I also get to find out, she tells me like all these like gossipy stories from the halls of power. And she also like tells me about what it's like in this Kenyan village that she visits often. And then like with Neil, in between, I mean, so you've talked to him, so like in between, it's not like the mic goes off and he just like stops being brilliant. He's always like, Maeve, do you know the difference between a stalactite and or do you know what flotsam is? Do you know what jetsam is? And I'm just like, aren't they the eels in the Little Mermaid? Like he's just so clever. So I just think it's so fun to me. Like, I guess with your job too, that we just get to talk to these people that are so brilliant, and we get to do that because we're just good at chatting.
In terms of form, like for my job, I read a lot of comics books, because a great comic will put out a book and it's a reason that they're doing press. And so I get to have them on the show, whoever it might be. And they're a mixed bag. It doesn't always track with how good people are on stage. And often the more successful ones are ones where the person's on stage voice translates comfortably to the page, such that when you're reading it, you feel like they're talking to you. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel that way about your book. Your writing is, it still feels like just as authentic a reflection of you, but it doesn't feel like an attempt to directly translate your stage voice to the page. Do you see your writing voice as different from your holding a microphone in a nightclub voice?
I do, yeah, because like some certain things happen. Like when you're on stage, at least for me, I'm often just working out an idea. So it's quite nascent and spontaneous, and I also need that laugh. So I will like do whatever I can do with when there's people who've been drinking staring at me waiting for that laugh. Like I will get it. And if that means exaggerating or fibbing or dancing, whatever I can think of, that's what happens on stage. Like I try and be as close to myself as possible, but it's, I'm there to kind of figure stuff out and get laughs. Whereas like with writing, it's more, it's just so different. It feels so different to me because obviously you're alone and you're trying to be truthful. And certainly like writing for the New York Times, literally they fact check everything. And that was a real, like it wasn't a problem at the start, but it was like, it was a real, like I had to pull up because they fact check every sentence. So I can't just like say something because it sounds a bit better or funnier or like easier, to make a point. So it's much closer to the truth. And also I have to really think things through. And I think kind of writing is a way of thinking, and you have to pin your colors to the mast as well, because you're actually putting it in a book. So you're kind of saying, this is it. Like, this is what I believe. And this is my experience. And I've, in some cases gone out and reported this, and this is what I found. So yeah, I think it's a very different medium for me, certainly. I quite like some of those books that are like comics, doing their comedy in book form. I get a kick out of those for sure.
Are you glad that you decided to become an immigrant in the United States rather than a native in Ireland?
Definitely. I think I'm also, I'm here at a really fascinating time for immigration. And when I say fascinating, I mean horrifying. I'm fine. I'm very lucky. I have my visa.
Did you get one of those person of extraordinary ability or whatever it's called?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So I got an alien of extraordinary ability visa, which it's called an O1 visa, which you can get if you've kind of if you're good at your
This
job, basically, and you're in a fancy
the
job.
Alien of Extraordinary Ability visa, of course, created by Ronald Reagan in response to the groundswell of support for E.T. from the movie E.T.
I just arrived here in a bike basket.
It's like, if your finger can glow, you get a visa.
Yeah, it's a very lucky break to get this visa. And that was one of the reasons I got so interested in immigration, because I kind of got here and I was like, wait now, like, why me and why not them? Why not all of these basically Americans who are living here without papers, but Americans all they know, and they've been through the school system, and they're paying taxes. The generation of dreamers, who are clearly more deserving of papers than I am, and not to be, feel any guilt about it or sort of white debt or anything, but I do feel a responsibility as an immigrant to at least know what other immigrants are facing and why that is, and to I'm very curious about it. And I started to follow that curiosity a few years ago with the podcast that I did about immigration, and now I write about it a lot, and I've met so many immigrants, and I just find it extraordinary, because so many people in America, are come from immigrant stock. Half this city, I'm in New York at the moment, and half the city was born outside of America. And right across the country, people have, ancestors who aren't from here. So it's kind of blows my mind. And the more I learn about it, and I think something kind of positive in the last year, because this administration is so vicious on immigrants, but something kind of positive is that I've noticed in the last year that more native-born Americans are actually interested now, and they're asking questions, and they're going to marches, and it took families being separated, but I think people are more aware now of the private prisons that immigrants are in, and the kind of hurdles that people face trying to get citizenship when there's no line to stand in.
Well, Maeve, I'm so grateful that you took the time to be on Bullseye, and your book is lovely and hilarious. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, Jesse, it was lovely. It was lovely to talk to you.
Maeve Higgins. Her new book, Maeve in America, Essays by a Girl from Somewhere Else, is in bookstores everywhere. She's also hosting a companion podcast to the book on her website. We'll have a link to it on the Bullseye page on MaximumFun.org. And if you'd like to hear Maeve's other show, where she and former Irish President Mary Robinson talk about climate justice, it's called Mothers of Invention.